Story 1. Trying to catch a mouse. I placed an empty Pringles can on the floor against the wall and was going to attempt to gently scoop him in there, but he got startled and ran along the wall right into the can, which I quickly picked up and brought outside. I honestly did not really think it would work to begin with, let alone have it work so smoothly. Story 2. I was having an issue with a PlayStation 1 controller, so I opened it up and found a broken trace. I was young and broke and didn't have any other options, so I got to thinking about how those Scantron tests worked. Our teacher explained that number 2 pencil lead is conductive, and the machine checks if the right spot is conductive to mark it. I grabbed a pencil and filled in the trace as much as I could, put it back together, and it worked great. Still works as far as I know. Story 3. A clock at my grandparents' house was running backward, so I unplugged it, turned the plug 180 degrees, and plugged it back in. Story 4. I have bought and sold items on Craigslist for most of my life, for over 20 years now. At one point, I had a unicycle that I didn't want, but I did want a mini fridge. I found the only person on the planet with a mini fridge who wanted a unicycle, and I made the trade. I also traded a motorcycle seat for a freshly baked red velvet cake. They were a baker by trade. Story 5. I handed in a book report that was actually just an executable file converted to text, and the teacher thought she corrupted my file and just gave me a +3. Story 6. I worked in an information technology job that I absolutely hated. It got to the point that I just mailed it in. I did the bare minimum. I was hoping to get fired and collect unemployment so I could regain my sanity. One day I came in and the manager wanted to talk. I went to an office where human resources was waiting. They told me they were eliminating my position. They offered me a generous severance package with 6 months' salary, stock options, and health benefits. I signed it immediately. I thought they wanted me out but had nothing on me. I did my work and never got written up or put on a performance improvement plan. I took a nice long vacation and regained my sanity. Afterwards, I found a better job. Story 7. Gambling. I was desperate and couldn't pay my rent 1 month. So like a desperate person, I put my last £10 into credit on the National Lottery application. I played a mini game and won £2,000. I haven't touched it since, as I know it was an astronomically small chance that one time. Story 8. Went back to college to get my bachelor's degree. I had a little less than 2 years worth of course credits to take, around 50 or so, but I didn't want to pay for 2 years. My college offered discounted summer courses and didn't charge any extra for fall and spring course loads above 12 credits. So whether it was 12 or 20 credits during the year, the price was the same. Anyway, I completed 6 credits over the summer and about 42 or 43 credits total between spring and fall, and I graduated with a bachelor's in computer science. I had no life outside of school, but I pulled it off somehow. I saved at least the cost of 1 full-time semester, likely 2. I forgot to mention the best part. I transferred my prior credits to this school. It wasn't practical to return to my original school at the time. All colleges have a residency requirement that mandates you to be there for a certain amount of time before you are eligible for a degree. I guess this is so you can't, for example, take one class at Harvard and claim you have a Harvard degree with all other credits from another school. My summer courses began in early July and ended in late August. The following 2 semesters were the normal fall and spring semesters, concluding in May. So I was there from early July to mid-May, essentially. The kicker is that is technically less than 1 year and, according to the school's residency requirements, I didn't qualify for a degree because I had been there for less than 1 year. I had to fight them for my degree. Eventually, I wore them down. I remember them finally physically handing me the degree. I practically ran out of the administration building before they changed their minds. I still remember that feeling, degree literally in hand, half walking and half running to my car, filled with proud, nervous energy. Story 9. Trying to sneak out of a building unnoticed. I heard footsteps in the hallway coming from the landing of the stairs. I threw a paper bag lunch against a wall down the hall, which caught the person's attention enough for me to sneak by without being noticed. Story 10. At the university I attended, you had to have 3 or 6 months of relevant work experience in order to graduate. Back in the 1920s, this was easy. There were about 500 students in great demand. Over the years, the definition of relevant was broadened. People got positions such as gas station attendant accepted for chemistry and landscaping for physics, all summer jobs while studying. I worked for the Royal Norwegian Postal Service during the summers. As graduation neared, I was hard at work on my thesis, and I submitted the documentation. A while later, it was returned with a note attached to it saying it was not relevant enough. My thesis was due in about 6 weeks, and it was a tough ask to cram 3 to 6 months of relevant experience into that time. I carefully removed the note and the staple, and then I stapled them together again with a visibly different staple. When I handed in my thesis, they told me I lacked relevant experience. I put on a dramatic scene of disbelief and frustration, exclaiming, "I sent you the documentation, and you just returned it. If there was a problem, you should have said something." They agreed to review it again, and they approved it. Story 11. Taking a job at this computer startup way back after I received my computer engineering degree was an interesting experience. There were 5 people in the company: the owner, his wife, his son, a programmer, and an IT specialist working out of a converted house that was now an office space. I thought it would be the worst decision ever, but they were offering me a job, and I was too lazy to go job hunting elsewhere. I just took early retirement after 35 years there and am now very well off. The company grew to 1,000 employees and is worth $500 million. Story 12. I was at camp and we were allowed to hang out in the city after dinner. We had to be back at 10 p.m. My friend and I had not been paying attention, and even if we ran, we weren't going to make it in time. So I changed the time on my phone so that it read 9:55 and strolled in casually. The porter started telling us off about being late, and I began acting really confused because I looked at my phone, and it was not 10 yet. We had no consequences. Story 13. I had a very difficult test in college, advanced statistics. I didn't know the material well. I sat in the test and could very visibly see the answers of the 2 people in front of me. I was tempted to just copy some of their answers. At some point, I reached the conclusion that they do not know the material better than I do, and if I am going down, it may as well be for my own mistakes. I answered what I could and made some random guesses on the questions I did not know how to answer. Against all my expectations, I received a score of 90 out of 100, with half the class failing, probably including those 2 ahead of me as well. I think this is one of those rare situations where my random guesses were just lucky, because I certainly did not have a deep understanding of the material. Story 14. The number of times percussive maintenance has actually worked. Just hit it with something, buddy. Story 15. Pretty niche, but this actually happened at my job yesterday. I am a lead pharmacy technician, and for brand name medications, many patients bring in a manufacturer's coupon, which significantly helps with the copay. For whatever reason, Rebelsis changed their general billing information, but the rejection didn't tell me what they changed it to, just that it changed, thanks Novo Nordisk. After a few minutes of being frustrated because I had the patient billing information and not even their website listed the general billing information, I thought to myself, what if I just looked up an advertisement picture for the coupon card? And sure enough, Google Images pulled through, and I was able to get the patient's copay from $2,900 to $10. Story 16. I quit my job and drove across America with barely any savings. No prospects, nor even a real plan. I landed a career in information technology, a wife, a child, the whole American dream package. I regularly think, often while manning the grill in my backyard, beer in hand, it worked. Story 17. Quite a few years ago, Disney was having a promotion. I believe it was called the Year of a Million Dreams. The main thing was that daily prizes would be randomly handed out, some large scale and some small. The most common prize was a Dream Fast Pass, which got you a front-of-the-line pass to all the rides in that particular park. My college friends and I had planned a trip to Walt Disney World, and for a few weeks prior, I got on Disney forums to see at what time of day these small prizes were handed out and possible common locations. When we arrived on the second day of vacation, I told them I wanted to ride a very particular ride at exactly 9 a.m. I told them I thought we could get a Dream Fast Pass if we did. It was a super low-demand ride, but it had the ability in the loading area to block about 50 to 100 people from view of the rest of the crowds. This was the usual size of the crowd being awarded the fast passes, and the location I had found to be most common. My friends humored me and we laughed about it. I took some ribbing. Really, it was all just good fun to try. However, as soon as we got to the loading zone, the doors closed shut, and a Disney employee with a year of a million dreams bag came walking in. My friends looked at me and said, "This is either the dumbest or the most amazing thing you have ever done." We all got those dream fast passes. Though honestly, we just enjoyed getting them and didn't actually use them. I still have mine fully intact and use it as a Christmas ornament. They still occasionally bring up the one time we managed to crack the Disney system. Story 18. I was in Turkey living in my car. I drove out on this long forest road to a national park called Yedigalar. Along the way, I hit a bump going too fast and broke open the oil pan on my car. I was stuck in the middle of nowhere. After spending the night with the gendarmerie, I hitchhiked back to the closest city and got some sheet metal and metal epoxy. I hitched back out to my car and patched the hole in the oil pan. I just needed to get back to the city to have it repaired. It worked. I was losing minimal oil and made it. Story 19. Not my idea, but it was a good one for the date. I worked in a library in the evening 20 years ago. An attorney came in and wanted to use a public computer to send an email. We chatted. The lawyer had a legal brief that was overdue to be sent. Back then, courts looked at the date of the postmark to determine if a brief was late or not, and late briefs might cause a case to be thrown out. They might even cause lawsuits or sanctions against the lawyer. It's a big deal. It was 9 p.m., too late to get today's date on postage. The lawyer emailed the brief to a friend in Hawaii, who sent it immediately with today's postage mark. Nowadays, court filings are electronic. Story 20. 5th or 6th grade in school. We were supposed to read some book, but I just couldn't be bothered, although we would eventually have to write an essay about it. Fast forward to the day of the essay, which is tomorrow, and the book is still basically untouched. School didn't start until around 9:30 tomorrow, so I could just get up early and plow through it. On the day of the essay, I get up on time and start reading. The book isn't long, a bit north of 200 pages. I started reading and soon I realized two things. One, there's no chance that I'll finish in time, and two, there's this funny pattern that every X number of pages something significant happens in the story. So I did the sensible thing and read every X number of pages, approximately like half a page. Not only did I finish the book with no problem, but I ended up being the only one in class who received full marks for my essay. Disclaimer: do not do this, students. It is unwise and risky and not worth the stress. Story 21. So it was my mom's birthday. We were barbecuing and we got her to stay inside and prepare food so we could decorate the front with balloons and streamers and what have you. Well, we got the whole thing done in secret as hoped, but then we realized there was no way we could get all the leftover decoration material and balloon pump inside without her noticing. Now there are two ways into our house: the back door that leads into the garage and then into the kitchen where Mom was, and the front door which is visible from the kitchen sink. So, I told my brother I would go in from the back door and distract her while he brought the items in through the front and down the hall past the kitchen. Once I got into the kitchen, it occurred to me that I had no plan of attack, so I legitimately just said, "Hey Mom, look at this dance I made," and started swaying and bopping up and down and doing jazz hands while going, la 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 la. Mind you, I am like 17 years old in this scenario, so she is just watching me, and when my brother comes in and is sneaking through the hall behind her with all the items, I keep telling her, "Wait, it's about to get good," and she kept watching in confusion. The second he was in the clear, I stopped and said, "Okay, that's it." And that was that. We succeeded. Story 22. I had a paper due in college but was only about halfway done with it. I submitted it that way and figured I would go back and submit the rest in the morning, claiming it was an accident. In the morning, I had a grade, a B+. Knowing she hadn't even read it, I emailed and told her there must be a mistake because I only submitted half of my paper. I sent the finished one and got an A. Pretty much a "give me the A or I will tell everybody you didn't even look at it." It worked, though. Story 23. Driving a car similar to what most police departments use in order to avoid getting interrupted while working roadside has reduced my interruptions from 2 to 3 times a week to only once every 2 months. While it was not fully my idea, I used to travel across the country and test cell towers to ensure the service is up to specifications. They would use my data to make adjustments and repairs, but I would get interrupted at least 2 to 3 times a week by people ranging from well-meaning to hostile. This was annoying and disruptive, especially when the tests were time-sensitive, and for the latter, it was unnerving. After 2 months of working that job, I was chatting with friends who were also hired by the company. Since my car was starting to show its age, we were allowed to use our own cars instead of renting. Since the testing is not conducted by the carrier itself, we do not have access to company cars. A friend jokingly recommended using a retired police car since nobody asks a police officer if they are lost or stranded when they are on the side of the road. To explain it to non-Americans, it took me a while to stop thinking I was getting pulled over every time I saw blue lights while overseas. Since United States police cars have exact requirements such as a calibrated speedometer and a heavy-duty engine, there are only about 4 police package cars. They usually tend to be consistent in a state. For a 300-mile drive, it is not unusual to only see the same make and model, whereas there are at least 8 makes and models within an 18-mile radius in Taiwan. Most police cars keep the police lights off until a situation calls for it, and some traffic enforcement vehicles go as far as using ghost graphics to sneak up on people. Thus, knowing when to conduct yourself isn't about looking for blue lights or high-visibility livery, but rather recognizing the traits and style cues of a few specific makes and models. As confirmed by statistics, the Ford Police Interceptor utility is the most recognizable, with about 2/3 of police departments using them. I tried looking for one but could not find one in a timely manner, so I bought the civilian equivalent the Police Interceptor utility was based on, a Ford Explorer. This worked even better since the previous owner customized it to have the chrome accents removed from the grille, and the wheels were black. Factory Explorer wheels are aluminum alloy or polished, but the Police Interceptor utility uses black steel wheels. Since the Police Interceptor utility has solidified its reputation, I get people who slow down even in states that do not use them. For work purposes, I would call it a success. I only got interrupted once every 2 months instead of almost daily for the 4.5 years I have worked as a radio frequency engineer and drive tester. I really wanted to answer the question but was falling asleep as it was near bedtime, so I fixed some grammatical issues. Story 24. I was dancing with a friend, and after we went to our cars to leave, I noticed her driver's side headlight was out. Not good when you are leaving a bar. So I literally said I was going to try the Fonzie technique. I tapped the casing and nothing happened, so I hit it harder, and one of the running lights turned on. I studied it, figured out where the light cover was closest to the bulb, and smacked it really hard in that spot. When it turned on, I felt like the world's biggest hero. Story 25. I told an ex-girlfriend not to marry the man she was engaged to, but instead to marry me. We just celebrated our 29th anniversary. Story 26. I had to do a presentation on the book, The Road, but I forgot to make one on the day I was supposed to present it. I did actually read the book and watch the movie. I just didn't prepare a single thing. We didn't have to submit anything. Basically just pop in a flash drive and do the presentation. While other people were doing their presentations, I quickly made a PowerPoint presentation with almost nothing but 1 to 3 words per slide. When it was my turn to present, I framed my presentation in a minimalist style and proceeded to present my whole presentation based on whatever I remembered from the book. I received full marks. Story 27. Repairing a broken car with toilet paper. I have done that twice on 2 different cars successfully for different faults. The first was on an old Toyota that kept overheating as the hydrostatic thermostat clutch on the fan shaft failed, so the cooling fan didn't spin at all. A simple roadside temporary fix was to open the clutch, jam it full of toilet paper so none of the intricate parts could move, and screw it back together. This worked fine, and the mechanic we took it to said it would be fine to drive like that until winter. The second was a Citroen that was somehow missing a spring clip on the air filter housing, causing it to intermittently draw air in while bypassing the mass airflow sensor, resulting in a lean condition and triggering engine fault codes. The temporary roadside fix was to jam a whole roll of toilet paper on top of the filter housing such that slamming the hood shut would hold the housing closed. There were no more fault codes. Story 28. It was the evening before a math test. My knowledge was around 0%. It was late, and the point where I had to start studying was an hour ago. So I did what every smart person would do. I smoked a joint to fall asleep faster, so at least I would be prepared for the next day. After smoking that joint, I couldn't sleep because of that difficult situation. So why not take another look at that math book? The marijuana didn't make me any smarter, as you might imagine, but I calmed my mind. So I read the first line and, what was that again? So I read it again, slowly, and look at that. I understood that sentence. Let's go. Second sentence. Got that. Third one. What was the first one again? I was kind of hooked. I read the entire material and scored 100 out of 100. Today, around 25 years later, I am on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder medication and understand what is happening in my brain. That marijuana was self-medication. Story 29. During the first semester of university, we had to take some generic basic office software classes. Very simple information regarding Excel, PowerPoint, and Word, so it was quite dull and boring. It turned out we had to save every assignment to give to the tutor at the end of the semester on a compact disc. Realizing I didn't have any of the files, I simply created folders with fake empty files for each assignment and burned the compact disc, hoping they wouldn't really bother to check. I received full marks. Story 30. Well, back when I was a smoker in 2002 and in my early 20s, I was at the pool in my apartment having beers with buddies and whatnot. I was lying in a chair and starting to get sweaty. A little pool had formed in my belly button. I decided I should put out my cigarette by popping it into my belly button. Did it work? Yes. Did it make a ring-shaped burn around the edge of my belly button that hurt quite a bit? Also yes. Extremely dumb, but it did technically work. Story 31. A friend with an old Toyota got rear-ended, but it only left a dent. My friends came up with the idea of using boiling water and a plunger to reset and fix the dent in the car frame. Somehow that actually worked. I would recommend this method if you only have small dents in the frame that can be fixed this way. Story 32. A friend of mine missed the deadline on some necessary paperwork and was going to be expelled from college. The fault lay with her guidance counselor, who had given her the wrong due date. I had the misguided idea of going and arguing on her behalf. When that didn't work, I went to that person's supervisor. I didn't think that worked either. Then they discovered that they had her incorrect address on file and used that to make an exception. They told her she should thank her friend. Story 33. I was making a pot of spaghetti sauce and I was adding random ingredients. I figured balsamic vinegar goes well with tomatoes, so I dumped a bunch of it in. Combined with the tomatoes, it tasted very acidic and vinegary. It was quite unpleasant. Having studied chemistry, I figured I needed something alkaline to counteract the vinegar, so I added a few spoonfuls of the first thing I could find, baking soda. And it worked. Tasted great after that. Story 34. Wanted a root beer float at a fast food restaurant. They didn't have that. I got a root beer and a vanilla milkshake and alternated sips. Tasted like the real thing. Story 35. I hooked up a suction machine to a drain in a patient's abdomen to clear the free fluid that had built up secondary to heart disease. Another doctor came by to express their concerns about it. Do you have any idea how much pressure that is? Yeah, it's on the machine. And isn't that dangerously more than you'd create with a syringe? I don't know. How much do you create with a syringe? Not that much. How much? Silence. All right, well, if you want to go ahead and do that math, you'll find that it's about 7,600 millimeters of mercury. The machine is way less than that. Chill. I acted way more confident than I was, but the machine did the job. Story 36. Quitting weed. I was very high and thought that marijuana was the reason I was getting nowhere. I laughed in the moment at how foolish I was to think that. Long story short, it was the best decision ever. Story 37. 20 years ago, I worked for a company that did digital video transcoding to put video libraries online. People would send us their massive tapes and DVDs, mostly things like corporate training and medical learning, and we would capture the video, encode it, then upload it to our hosted streaming or download servers. A lot of it we automated. Once the video was captured, it was handed off directly to the encoding software that would encode it to a variety of formats. This was before modern HTML video standards were a thing. We were still using Windows Media and QuickTime, and then it would copy to our servers. Then two things happened the same week. A client had new videos that they were producing and wondered if they could just send them to us over the internet instead of shipping us a digital videotape, and our encoding pipeline software got an upgrade that included watch folders. For those who don't know, a watch folder is a directory on a computer that performs certain tasks to a file automatically when it is placed in the folder. A coworker and I were both mobile media enthusiasts and realized that with our level of automation and these new watch folders, we could create a platform where anyone could directly upload a digital video from their computer. Smartphones were not a thing yet, but it would automatically encode the video, place it on our streaming servers, and send them back a link for sharing elsewhere. We took it to the chief technology officer, who loved the idea, but the chief executive officer nixed it. In fact, he was quite vocal about hating it. Our entire business was monetized through recurring monthly hosting of thousands of hours of content. Nobody out there wanted to share video via links, he said. They wanted to embed it in their web pages. He correctly surmised that very few personal users were going to pay $200 a month to host self-made streaming video to share with other users. We argued that there were already video-based advertisement networks out there and that it would be an easy way to monetize it. He countered that it would be competing with ourselves and would dilute our brand. In the end, he told us not to proceed with the project. About 2 or 3 months later, they pulled all of us engineers into an emergency meeting to discuss what to do about this new upstart that was threatening to take over the entire streaming video market by expanding it to everyone with a camera. That company was called YouTube, and not long after, they sold it for $1 billion. So, in the end, my idea worked, and worked great, just not for me. Story 38. I had a large lantern that ran on D batteries. It needed 4, but I only had 3. So I crammed a bunch of pennies in the gap for the last battery, and it worked. Story 39. I had finished basic training, but my combat medic course still had drill sergeants. One Friday evening, we were told to get inspected by the drill sergeant before getting a weekend pass. I made sure my uniform was perfect before approaching the sergeant. He told me I needed a haircut and dismissed me without a weekend pass. The barber shop on post was already closed for the day, so I was completely out of luck. Realizing I had nothing left to lose, I joined the line of soldiers to get inspected. When I finally got to the front of the line, I asked, "How do my boots look now, drill sergeant?" He gave my polished boots a studious glance, then said, "Much better. Have a fine weekend, Private." Story 40. I had to give my cat a pill. With dogs, it's easy. You can wrap it in bacon and watch your fingers. With my cat, I thought I would try liver pate. Down it went. Story 41. In the last week of my senior year of university, I became very sick with the flu, with a temperature so high that I actually began to hallucinate. I thought the windows in the high-rise across from a schoolyard were little television sets, each turned to a different channel. I wondered why I had never noticed them before and watched them until 1 a.m. That was an unfortunate choice, as it was the night before my 8 a.m. History of Renaissance Theater final, which was to count for 66% of our mark. I stumbled to campus the next morning unshowered, unshaved, and still feverish, with dribbles of vomit on my sweatshirt and a foolish plan to show my professor how sick I was, then request a makeup exam. But instead of my scowling professor, a graduate student teaching assistant I didn't know was supervising. He didn't care how sick I was. I was so confused and fever disoriented by his dismissal of my request that I somehow convinced myself I was just having a typical didn't study for the final bad dream, and because obviously there would be no real consequences when I finally woke up, I just sat down and wrote an essay on one of the 4 given topics. The next morning, when my head partially cleared, I couldn't remember a thing. A week later, when I picked up my exam, I expected a failing grade and a professor's reprimand, for he was a sarcastic person. But his margin note said something like, "Most original undergraduate essay I've read in 10 years. And I discovered he had given me a 95%. I still had no idea what I had written 12 pages about while in the throes of my fever dream, and even with a properly functioning brain, I really didn't understand much more than a third of what I had written. But when I deciphered my loopy scrawl, I found not just that I had strayed wildly off topic. I had gone on and on with some arrogant, pseudo-intellectual nonsense, calling Christopher Marlowe a pernicious liar and a despicable hypocrite for writing such an evil character as Tamburlaine while claiming to be a humanist and a lover of humanity. I finished with a bunch of accusations about him giving some minor Elizabethan royal a disease while on assignment from Windsor as a spy in her family's household, which was likely why he was assassinated, rather than killed in a pub brawl like the history books say. That crazy essay boosted my final mark enough that I actually graduated with honors. Not that anybody who subsequently hired me to work in the scene shop ever cared. Story 42. In high school, our two-person team built a robot for a competition. The robot has an arm which can be controlled to go up or down, and it is supposed to stay in that position until a new command is input. Unfortunately, the arm gradually dropped due to its weight when there is no input. It was 3 a.m. before the competition started, and I was tired and struggling to solve this problem. Suddenly, I had a simple idea. What if I programmed it so that when there is no input, it defaults to the command to move the arm up with the lowest power? It worked. The arm stayed still when there was no input. If I recall correctly, we won second place as well as a special award. Story 43. I screwed a Lego Technic piece into my hard disk drive to keep it in the rack because I couldn't find the other rail anywhere. It worked after I found the right piece and screw size. Still in there. Story 44. I didn't do my homework to write an interpretation. The teacher called me out to read it aloud, so I just opened a random page in my notebook and pretended to read it off the page while coming up with it from my mind. The teacher liked it very much, but then asked me to read a paragraph again. I pretended I couldn't find that passage because I can't read my handwriting anymore. It worked twice with her. Story 45. In college, we were supposed to write a paper about crime and why people commit crimes. I thought the idea was silly and wrote a novel about why crime itself made no sense in the school forums. Only for my teacher to say, "Good work, but you have to turn it in through the portal." I submitted it like an actual essay and received a B on it. I got a B on a rant in an essay I thought was foolish. Story 46. Freshman year of high school, we had quizzes on books we were reading in English. I totally forgot we had a quiz and was already at school very early in the morning and left the book at home. I decided to check to see if the classroom was open, though they always lock the doors, to find a copy of the book to borrow so I could study. The classroom was open and I was looking around like a thief in the night, knowing if I was caught it was going to look suspicious, but really it was innocent. Well, it wasn't so innocent because I ended up finding the quiz and taking quick pictures with my phone before hurrying out of there. Story 47. I had a paper due as a surprise one day in one of my college classes. I thought I had an extra 2 days and hadn't started, but it was due that day. I ran up to my professor and told him that I didn't think it was due today and hadn't brought it to class. He said it was due today. I ran outside across the street to the library and typed out the entire thing in 40 minutes since the class was 1.5 hours long, then sprinted back in, acting like I had just run all the way to get it. I was able to turn it in because the class wasn't over yet and I received a 90. Story 48. When I was 17, my buddy and I wanted to get some tobacco to try out. Rebels, I know. This was when phone books were still the main source of finding a phone number. It just so happened that the font and color of the numbers in the yellow pages matched our license font color, and the yellow matched the background of the license perfectly. So we cut out a number that we were going to tape to our license so it appeared as if we were 18 instead of 17. Again, this was when you could be 18 and buy it in the United States. We used clear packing tape and got the number lined up just right. We wrapped the entire license in tape so you couldn't see a seam line. The paper is so thin you could only see it if you looked from the side and caught the reflection just right. Fast forward, we successfully got the tobacco products. Literally, just some grape-flavored cigars if I remember correctly. We parked behind a neighborhood that wasn't fully developed yet. And like clockwork, we saw headlights coming. Then a spotlight. Well, this is it, we thought. Jail for life. A police officer came up and questioned us, obviously thinking we were smoking marijuana, but we weren't. just hanging out with our grape cigars. Then the worst question he could ask, "How old are you?" We said 18 like fools, but it was perfectly timed so it seemed legitimate. He took both of our licenses and looked at them with his flashlight. I mean, really looked at them, flipping them over, examining them from the side, everything. We knew that he would see the one number taped on there, but he handed them back to us and told us to have a nice night. In the end, I believe what saved us was his bright flashlight. Had it been daylight, you could have seen it if you looked hard enough. Story 49. The printer wouldn't print, and I had tried all of the solutions. One internet recommendation suggested turning it upside down and shaking it. I did, and the tiniest bit of wire sheathing from our renovation came out. Sure enough, the printer worked again. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.